This is Chris again, and at this time we're going to be looking at the subtotal feature, the command subtotal, which is found under the Data tab on the ribbon. Now, first of all, let's talk about what subtotal is. The feature, or the command subtotal, begins the process of summarizing our data. So it's one of the basic ways of summarizing a large volume of data in our spreadsheet. However, you'll notice that we're using a very small spreadsheet, and that's because we want you to be able to see everything that happens. For subtotal to work, there are certain things that must be in place. One of them is that the column that we want the subtotal to work on, not to calculate, not to do the calculation, but to use as the foundation of what subtotal will do, has to be sorted. So for example, if I wanted to find the average age of the women within this spreadsheet, I would have to sort gender, so that all the women would be placed together, and then I'd be able to use subtotal to calculate an average age. Other thing with subtotal is going to work on the data in place, which means that the table you're looking at in the spreadsheet, the subtotal will be used on that table. In order therefore to do anything else, I'm going to have to remove the subtotal. And the last thing, before we jump into the feature, is that subtotal can only do one calculation at a time. Meaning, if I'm going to do an average, that's all it can do. If I'm going to count, that's all it can do. If I'm going to sum, that's all that it can do. So we're going to do two subtotals so that you see the process work. I'm going to do the subtotal on gender, so we're going to be using men and women. I'm going to be doing an average of the age first, then I'm going to count the number of men and the number of women. So here goes. First thing, as I said, is that we have to sort the column that we want to use to the subtotal to be used to be based on. So I'm going to click on gender. I'm going to go to the tab data on the ribbon, and then I'm going to use A to Z. Now, I could use the sort command. However, A to Z is much quicker. It doesn't ask any questions, and as long as our spreadsheet does not have any empty rows or columns, it's done. No empty rows, no columns. Click on the heading, A to Z, finished. If there were any empty rows or columns, the sort A to Z would not be able to sort beyond the empty row or beyond the empty column. Next, I'm going to go to subtotal, which is at the extreme right-hand side of the ribbon. Now, when I go into subtotal, you notice that a separate window comes up. That's the subtotal window. There are several list box, drop-down lists, and that will allow me to indicate exactly what I want done in this spreadsheet. So the first thing we're going to do is at each change in. Whichever column we sorted, that is what we're going to choose for at each change in. So here is at each change in, and as I said, whichever column we sorted, which in this instance is gender, that's what we choose for at each change in. Next, we choose the function we wanted. Remember, we said average. Now, what do I want to average? I want to average age. So I'm going to remove any other checks or ticks that may be there because we only want to average age. Everything else will remain as is, and we click on OK. There it is. So, at the extreme left-hand side of our spreadsheet, you will notice that the data, that there's some There's a feature there that was not there before. The number 1 indicates the grand average. So it gives you the grand average of everything. Number 2 gives you the subgroupings. So it gives you the average age of the females and the average age of the men. And number 3 allows us to see all the detail. Now, it may be that I don't want to see student ID, first name, or last name. So I can group these. I'm going to highlight column A, B, and C, and then I'm going to group them. Now, when I group them, and you notice I'm doing it within the subtotal, I can hide them. I clicked on the minus key that was above, and I hid or collapsed those columns. I can expand the columns. So what it means is that in our regular spreadsheet where we would hide columns or rows for them not to be seen, within the subtotal feature, I can group columns that I don't want or that I may want. And I can hide them as the case may be, or I can expand them. So for example, suppose in this instance I really didn't need the major and the GPA, but the grade was important. I could group major and GPA, and then I can collapse the group. So that what we end up seeing is for each gender, we will see the person's age and the grade that they got. When I need everything to come back, then I will expand the group. And once I'm finished with the group, then I can ungroup. So you'll notice that I highlight the group when I'm done with it, and ungroup. Now, with the subtotal, I now want to change the average to a count, and I'm going to count the same thing. So I don't need to change the gender because that's what the data is sorted on, but I will change the function I'm using to count, and I will count age. Now you notice now at the bottom it says replace current subtotals. So when I click on OK, it's going to change the current subtotal, which is average, to count. And I also have summary below. And there it is. So what we looked at previously was average. Now I'm doing a count. And as I said to you, subtotal can only do one function at a time. And I'm going to collapse males. So I see the detail for female count and the subtotal for male count because I've collapsed the grouping. I want the group to come back. I'm going to expand it. So it's a nice quick way of summarizing the data. So you're working on a spreadsheet, somebody comes up and asks you a question, we can use the subtotal feature and get the answer quickly. And group the columns as the case may be, get the answer that is required, print it, and now that I am finished and answered what was asked of me, I'm going to remove the subtotal. So I go back into the subtotal feature and remove all. And our data comes back. So that's the subtotal feature. It starts the process of allowing us to summarize the data. Bye for now.